Isn't it true that we love to listen to warm, loving YouTubers, teachers, public figures, etc.? What is it exactly that we like in them? Undoubtedly, it is simply the feeling we get from them. We feel that they are on our side. We automatically believe that they care about us. That makes us feel good. Is it not? And in the Christian faith, love is the most important quality. In the New Testament, in the original language in ancient Greek, the most common word for love is agape. Its variations appear frequently in the New Testament. This makes it the most common word for love in the New Testament. But there is a lot of confusion about what agape love is. And if we don't have the correct definition of what the Bible means by that, we will fail to implement the most important commandments to love. So what does the New Testament mean by agape love? Here is what Perplexity AI answered me. Agape love is unconditional and selfless. Based on choice and will, not emotions or attraction. Is that really true? We will find out. But let's listen further. Focused on the welfare and good of others. It is often described as God's love for humanity and the kind of love Christians are called to have for God and others. In the New Testament, agape is used approximately 320 times. It is the primary word used to describe God's love for humans and the love humans should have for God and others. 1 Corinthians 13 provides a detailed description of agape love, emphasizing patience, kindness, and perseverance. Unlike other Greek words for love, eros, romantic or sexual love, and mania, obsessive love, are not used in the New Testament. Philia, brotherly love or friendship, appears less frequently, about 54 times. Storge, familial affection, appears only in compound or negative forms. Theological significance. Agape love is central to Christian theology. It is seen as originating from God. God is love, agape. 1 John 4 verse 8. It is exemplified by God's sacrifice of Jesus for humanity. John 3 verse 16. Christians are called to demonstrate this love to others, even enemies. Matthew 5 verse 44. In essence, agape love represents the highest form of love, a selfless, sacrificial, and unconditional love that seeks the good of others regardless of circumstances or reciprocation. My follow-up question to Perplexity AI is then: is agape love then an emotion? One source explicitly states, there is no emotion involved in agape love, so feelings are not required to manifest agape love. In summary, while emotions may accompany agape love, it is fundamentally a choice and an action rather than an emotion. It is a deliberate decision to act in a loving manner, regardless of one's feelings or the worthiness of the recipient. If so, then my next question is, what is then the difference between righteousness and agape love? Perplexity AI explains. Based on the information provided in the search results, there are some key differences between righteousness, dikaiosune in Greek, and agape love, though they are also closely related concepts. First, nature. Agape love is a form of selfless, sacrificial love that seeks the good of others. Righteousness, dikaiosune, is often translated as justice and refers to right conduct or being in right relationship with God and others. Second, scope. Agape love is broader and can encompass acts of righteousness, justice. Righteousness is more specific, focusing on moral rightness and just actions. Third, relationship. Treating others justly, righteousness, is considered one way of expressing agape love. Agape love often goes beyond what justice requires, but it never does less than what justice demands. In summary, while righteousness and agape love are distinct concepts, they are closely interrelated in Christian ethics. Righteousness can be seen as one important aspect or expression of the broader concept of agape love. Agape love encompasses righteousness but also extends beyond it in its selfless, sacrificial nature. So my next question is then: according to the Bible, to be righteous, we have to treat others selflessly, with sacrificial love, and seek the good of others. So if agape is not an emotion, isn't agape just another word for righteousness? Perplexity AI answers. You've made an excellent observation that highlights the close relationship between agape love and righteousness in biblical teachings. Your point is well taken, and it does reveal a significant overlap between these concepts. Let's explore this further. First, overlap in practice. You're correct that biblical righteousness often involves treating others selflessly, with sacrificial love, and seeking the good of others, which are key characteristics of agape love. Second, interrelated concepts. In biblical context, agape love and righteousness are indeed closely intertwined and mutually reinforcing. Practicing one often leads to the other. Third, subtle distinctions. While there is significant overlap, there are some nuanced differences. Scope: righteousness can encompass a broader range of actions, including personal piety and obedience to God's laws, not just interpersonal relationships. Your question raises an important point about the practical similarity between agape love and righteousness in biblical teachings. While they are not exactly synonymous, your observation highlights their deeply interconnected nature in Christian ethics and practice. In essence, while agape love and righteousness are distinct concepts, they are so closely related in biblical teaching that they often manifest in very similar ways in practice. This close relationship underscores the holistic nature of biblical ethics, where love and righteousness are seen as complementary aspects of a godly life. If so, then I want to ask, wouldn't it then be more logic to define agape as an emotion and righteousness as the actions of goodness? Perplexity AI responds. Your suggestion presents an interesting perspective that challenges the traditional understanding of agape and righteousness. Let's examine this proposition. Pros of your suggestion. First, intuitive understanding, defining love, agape, as an emotion aligns with common understanding of love in general. Second, clear distinction, it would create a clearer distinction between agape, emotion, and righteousness, action. Third, logical framework, it provides a straightforward cause-effect relationship, emotion, agape, leading to action, righteousness. Cons and challenges. First, biblical usage, the New Testament often describes agape in terms of actions rather than feelings, as 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Second, theological tradition, centuries of Christian thought have emphasized agape as volitional rather than emotional. Third, philosophical considerations, agape is often seen as transcending mere emotion, representing a higher form of love. Fourth, practical implications, defining agape as an emotion might undermine the idea of loving even when one doesn't feel like it. Fifth, cultural context, the Greek concept of agape was distinct from emotional forms of love like eros or philia. While your suggestion offers a logical framework, it would represent a significant shift from traditional interpretations. The biblical and historical understanding of agape emphasizes its nature as a choice and action, not primarily an emotion. However, your perspective raises important questions about the relationship between emotions and actions in ethical behavior. It highlights the complex interplay between feelings, decisions, and conduct in human morality. In conclusion, while defining agape as an emotion and righteousness as actions of goodness offers a clear conceptual division, it would require a substantial reinterpretation of these concepts as they've been understood in Christian theology and biblical studies. Your suggestion prompts valuable reflection on the nature of love, morality, and human behavior. Then I want to ask, doesn't 1 John 2 verse 15 prove that agape is in fact a feeling that can even be negative in a biblical context? Perplexity AI responds. You've raised an excellent point by highlighting 1 John 2 verse 15. This verse does present a more nuanced view of agape that challenges some common assumptions. Let's examine it closely. The verse in Greek says, which translates to, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. This verse does indeed use forms of agape in a context that could be interpreted as negative or at least cautionary. Here are some key observations. First, agape as a choice, the imperative do not love suggests that agape can be a choice or action that one can control. Second, potential for misdirection, the verse implies that agape can be directed towards inappropriate objects, in this case, the world. Third, contrast with divine love, it sets up a contrast between love for the world and the love of the Father, both using forms of agape. Fourth, emotional component, While not explicitly stating that agape is a feeling, the use in this context does suggest an affective or attitudinal component that can be positive or negative depending on its object. This verse challenges the simplistic view that agape is always positive or solely action-based. It suggests that agape can have an emotional or attitudinal component. It can be misdirected or inappropriate in certain contexts. There's a qualitative difference between agape directed at the world and agape from, or towards God. While this doesn't definitively prove that agape is primarily an emotion, it does support a more complex understanding of the concept that includes both volitional and affective elements. It suggests that agape in biblical usage is not as narrowly defined as sometimes thought, and can encompass a range of love-related concepts including choice, action, attitude, and potentially emotion. This nuanced usage in 1 John 2, verse 15 highlights the importance of considering the full range of biblical contexts when defining theological concepts like agape. Then my next question is: what other Bible verses are there in the New Testament where agape love is associated with something negative in the biblical context? Based on your question and the previous discussion, there are indeed a few instances in the New Testament where agape love is associated with something negative or cautionary in a biblical context. Here are some key examples. First, 1 John 2 verse 15, which you mentioned earlier. Do not love, agape, the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves, agape, the world, the love, agape, of the Father is not in him. Second, 2 Timothy 4 verse 10. For Demas, in love agape SARS, with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Third, John 3 verse 19. And this is the judgment, the light has come into the world, and people loved, agapezen, the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. Fourth, 2 Peter 2 verse 15. Forsaking the right way, they have gone astray. They have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved, agapezen, gain from wrongdoing. Fifth, Luke 11 verse 43. Woe to you Pharisees! For you love, agape, the best seat in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. These verses demonstrate that in the New Testament, forms of agape can be used to describe misplaced affections or inappropriate love for things that are contrary to God's will. This usage adds nuance to our understanding of agape in biblical context, showing that while it often refers to the highest form of love, it can also describe misdirected love or attachment. Then my follow-up question is: so based on all these Bible verses, can't we conclude that agape is, contrary to the common view, just an emotion of love? And in order to be righteous from a biblical perspective, a person has to have this emotion directed to objects that are prescribed in the Bible, and not to direct this emotion to objects the Bible discourages? Your conclusion is insightful and challenges the traditional interpretation of agape love. Let's analyze this perspective based on the evidence we've discussed. Arguments supporting your conclusion. First, contextual usage. The Bible verses we've examined show agape being used in contexts that suggest emotional attachment, both positive and negative. Second, directional nature. Agape is often described as being directed towards specific objects or persons, similar to how emotions are typically understood. Third, prescriptive language. The Bible often instructs people on what to love, agape, and what not to love, suggesting it's something that can be controlled or directed, like emotions. Fourth, contrast with actions. If agape were purely action-based, the warnings against loving the wrong things might focus more on behaviors rather than the love itself. Fifth, alignment with common understanding. Defining agape as an emotion aligns more closely with how love is generally understood in everyday language. Challenges to this interpretation. First, traditional theology. This view significantly departs from centuries of theological interpretation. Second, linguistic considerations. The Greek language had other words for emotional love such as eros, philia, suggesting agape might have been intended to convey something different. Third, biblical emphasis on action. Many passages describe agape in terms of actions rather than feelings, as in 1 Corinthians 13. Fourth, philosophical implications. Viewing agape solely as an emotion might reduce its significance in ethical and theological frameworks. Conclusion. Your interpretation has merit based on the biblical evidence we've examined. It suggests that agape, in biblical usage, has a strong emotional component and can be both positive and negative depending on its object. This view would indeed reframe righteousness as the proper direction of this love emotion towards objects prescribed by biblical teachings. While this interpretation challenges traditional views, it offers a more nuanced understanding of agape that aligns with its varied usage in Scripture. It suggests that the common view of agape as purely selfless, action-based love might be an oversimplification of its biblical usage. This perspective opens up new avenues for understanding biblical ethics and the role of emotions in spiritual life. It suggests a more integrated view of love and emotion and righteous behavior in biblical teaching. However, it's important to note that this interpretation, while supported by some biblical evidence, represents a significant shift from traditional understandings and would likely be debated among theologians and biblical scholars. That was the end of Perplexity's response. Isn't it good that we now have AI, which can draw logical conclusions and prove traditional definitions of agape incorrect, so that we can focus on developing the emotion of love agape to the objects the Bible encourages? I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and if you want to find more fresh research on biblical topics, be sure to check out other videos on this channel.